Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Pala Rajesh, the Vice President for the Royal College of Edinburgh and the Chairman of the Intercollegiate Cosmetic Surgery Oversight Committee. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedules this evening to participate in this exciting webinar. This is your opportunity to ask questions, and please keep them coming throughout this hour. And I would like you to put them up on the chat box as soon as you see them. This evening, we have Professor Vivian Lees, who is the representative of the Royal College of Surgeons of England. She's a council member and the council lead for the Intercollegiate Cosmetic Surgery Oversight Committee. We have Mr. Paul Harris, who is the immediate past president of BAPS and is a very well-known member who has spent a lot of time working on this area. We have Ruth Waters, who is the incoming president of BAPRAS, and we have Jairam Srinivas, who is the main driver of this course. The revised certification scheme is now truly intercollegiate and has been developed in partnership with the 4 Royal Colleges and several specialty associations. I would now request Professor Lees to start the proceedings. Thank you, Vivian.
Thank you, Rajesh. Well, good evening. My name is Vivian Lees. I'm the council lead for the group. So if I could take the next slide, please. So for me, this is actually the culmination, or perhaps it's the beginning of a 20-year journey to try and define the ethical stream of cosmetic surgery practice for the benefit of our patients. And this really started way back between the professional surgical specialty associations and the college, led initially by Chris Koo from plastics, then from John Lowry from the ENT side. And just to acknowledge that they laid the foundations of what's before you tonight. So what is the point of certification? Why would you want to do it if you didn't have to do it? Well, the point is this. We have a training program, but certification is something different. It's demonstrating your experience and your actual practice in this field of work. So eventually, a certified surgeon will be able to demonstrate to their patient that they meet the professional standards for providing cosmetic surgery as laid down by the GMC, by the colleges who have publications on these things, for the area of practice, be it on the face or the body, which is appropriate to that surgeon's specialty. Not only that, but you will be able to demonstrate the same set of commitments to the hospital or institution in which you are seeking or currently continue to practice. The GMC have this as one of their stable of certification schemes that are up and running at the moment. And this is the only surgical one of these, but they are planning in the not distant future to actually create a credential for cosmetic surgery. And the consequence of that is that they will put something after your name up on the register so people can go and check what parts of cosmetic surgery you're registered for. Now, the scheme's been running a wee while, but we have addressed part of the high costs of the earlier part of the scheme, and we're now able to offer a lower cost, but I will just put a caveat under that, which is that it depends on the number of early adopters whether we can keep the price at this level or not. So the early adopter, as of now, with the new relaunch scheme, will definitely benefit from the lower cost. And then it depends on uptake whether that continues at that price. Not only have we got the relaunched scheme and the new masterclass, but the scheme is going to develop over time, and there will be some other online resources that will be available to and support the practice of those who've already certified. Next slide, please. So what do you have to do in order to apply for the scheme? Well, first of all, you have to get onto your specialist register. So that's a CCT for most of the registrars. If you're in the Republic of Ireland, that's still a CCST. And then if you have a CSER, because you've gone through the Article 14 route, that also is eligible. But please understand that this certification is built on the whole range of behaviours and skills which have already been achieved in those previous qualifications. So you would then apply online at that address, which we will keep up at several points during this presentation. And then, having registered, you attend for an online masterclass, and it is mandatory to do this. And you'll hear more about that a little later in this presentation. There are then various items of evidence that have to be submitted, most of which are reflected in the appraisal process already, but not all. So there is some extra work that has to be done to collate that. And then that's put onto the database that the English College hosts. The total cost of the scheme, including the masterclass, is currently £1,125. Okay. Next slide, thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. My name is Paul Harris. Thanks, Vivian and Paula. You'll see the slides have slightly changed because I am unashamedly really representing BARPs and plastic surgeons here. As Vivian has mentioned, there's a long story and a history to the development of this process, and recently plastic surgeons have not really engaged with it, and I have a declaration to make, which is I'm not certified, and I had no intention of becoming certified, I have to be honest, until I became president of BARPs, and it's taken me 2 years to engage with the college over the certification process. And as a result, I'm now intending to do it. And I'm hoping to explain to you why I think it's now ready and why I think we should be engaging with it, and hopefully to persuade you to do it. Next slide, please. So this is the problem, as you've heard from Vivian, there's a backstory to it, but this is the real problem in the UK, is that, and I'm looking at this from the BARP's perspective, from the plastic surgeon's perspective, if you like, that, you know, the bit that I see is the plastic surgeons, the members of the BARPs, but there are many other surgeons carrying out cosmetic surgery in the UK. And there are trained UK-based non-BARPs plastic surgeon members. There are trained UK-based surgeons in other specialties, ENT, breast, maxillofacial ophthalmology. But that's only making up part of the physicians or doctors or surgeons in the UK who are carrying out cosmetic surgery. And the rest, and it probably is the bigger part of this actually, are UK-based surgeons with unrecognized or no training in the specialty at all, non-UK based surgeons who are flying in and flying out, carrying out cosmetic surgery, and also lots of non-surgeons. So the idea behind the scheme has been to try and differentiate the trained from the untrained, if you like. And I think that perhaps somewhere along the line, plastic surgeons have got a little bit caught up in differentiating between the trained surgeons rather than the trained and the untrained. Next slide, please. Of course, this comes out, Vivian mentioned the longer history, but as a result of some of the problems that we've experienced in the UK, the KIO review in 2013 set some goals, and the Royal College of Surgeons in England were equipped to try and address this, and they set up the group with the CSIC, which is a committee meeting to try and crystallize out some actions out of the KIO recommendations. And as part of that, they set up the certification process. The GMC were looking at it, and they were doing credentialing in parallel. The masterclass and submission process were the result of that work by the Royal College of Surgeons of England. But essentially, it was boycotted by plastic surgeons. A very, very small number of plastic surgeons engaged with that, which is why I became involved as I became president. And our main concern was that this process did not recognize and even undermined the specific training and examination in cosmetic surgery that only plastic surgeons undertook as part of their CCT in the UK. So that was really ignored, and plastic surgeons felt that they didn't want to take part in it. And indeed, the feeling was that if plastic surgeons did take part in it, it would validate or rubber stamp a shortcut route to cosmetic surgery for many other surgeons. And that's why we kind of sort of boycotted it, really. And it may perhaps, it wasn't a money-making exercise for the college, but it was perceived as something that was top down, was being foisted upon us as trained individuals. And really, it should be foisted upon the non-trained individuals. So that was the starting point, and that's why, starting point for me, of course, and that's why no one really was engaging, and what I set about to try and change. Next slide, please. So on behalf of our members, I and Mark Henley, on behalf of BAPRAS, went to the Royal College of Surgeons of England with your specific concerns. And these are the things that we highlighted and actually have been totally addressed by this relaunch and reevaluation of the certification scheme. So first of all, I was told that the scheme did not recognize the specific training and ability of plastic surgeons to operate in all areas. And we recommended an all area certificate for plastic surgeons. And indeed, that's now been incorporated in this new iteration. And it doesn't undermine or take away the other areas, the other subspecialties of certification. It just recognizes the broader aspect of a plastic surgery training. The other criticisms were that the application process was cumbersome and time consuming. And you will see now that in the relaunch, audit figures such as BARP's audit figures and fin data can now be submitted rather than a detailed logbook. It's a streamlined web portal, which you will see if you go online. There are a number of cases that need to be submitted for detailed reflection, and that takes time. And as an alternative, so that we could promote M&M meetings and cosmetic surgery audit, we now feel that you can, as long as you've discussed a case in a local audit meeting, that can be used instead of detailed reflection in terms of your submission process. The costs were seen as excessive, and as you've heard from Vivian, those costs have been brought right down now, but they can only be brought down if we all engage. And it's now become significantly, and Mark Henley pushed on this in a big way. It was really brinkmanship over this point, was that it's no longer Royal College of Surgeons of England, it's now intercollegiate, so it encompasses all colleges in the UK and should be appealing to everybody. And of course, there's no profit in this whatsoever for anybody. It's just about helping and differentiating trained from non-trained surgeons. The other thing which plastic surgeons communicated with me was that they felt it was meaningless. It didn't have any benefit whatsoever. It was just another hurdle. And that may have been the case, but moving forward, it will be mandated. It will be mandated by the CQC when they visit premises, and it will be mandated by the GMC as they launch credentialing, which is underway and will be one of the pilots. So that is going to happen, and we need to be ahead of the game on that. And I think as we move forward, we will hear from the indemnifiers that they will be looking for certification to be able to continue with your indemnity cover. Next slide, please. There are some other things which you'll hear about perhaps through the course of the evening, but also if you look into this in more detail, things like psychological assessment, the numbers of procedures have been adjusted, and the retrospective count has been lengthened because of COVID. So the college has really worked and looked at this in detail and tried to remold this to match our concerns and make it more appealing to everybody. Moving forward, there's going to be a continual review process with this new committee the Intercollegiate Cosmetic Surgery Oversight Committee, which will look at things like trainees and provisional registration periods, and it'll be a continual iterative process. So next slide, please. I really want to communicate with you. I'm representing VARPS here, and there are lots of criticisms I have about some of the processes before, but actually in my 2 years that I have communicated with the college over this, they have listened to our concerns and they have made significant changes, as you can see from my previous slides. And this is an overused term, I know it is, everyone talks about fit for purpose, particularly in government, but the scheme is now fit for purpose. And we need, as plastic surgeons and as all trained surgeons, we need to differentiate ourselves from untrained surgeons, and we need to get behind this course and fully sign up now. Particularly with the web access, we can get the numbers through quite quickly and make this part of safer plastic surgery or cosmetic surgery in the UK. Thank you. Next slide.
Right, so I'll take it from there. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Vivian, for all you said already. So my remit this evening is to discuss the professional behaviours course that is part of the certification. So a lot of what you've heard about the certification scheme outlines the things you have to submit to show that you qualify for the certificate. Your qualifications, your training, evidence of your practice. But the professional behaviours course goes a little bit deeper because aesthetic surgery is a little bit different from other surgery. It's at the end of the day, it's our patients who judge us and judge our work. And we really live or die as a professional in aesthetic surgery by our reputation and how good a job we do for our patients. So how we behave as we deliver our work is one of the most important things we do, and it really profoundly influences the outcome of our surgery, as hopefully we will demonstrate with this course. So what the course intends to do is inform you of the things that are dictated to you that you have to comply with as an aesthetic surgeon. But also part of the course is to make you think deeper about how you behave and deliver your consultation and your interaction with your patient in order to achieve the outcome that you want, which is them feeling grateful that they came to you and that the problem that they came with has been addressed. I think, a lot of us who've been around in the business for a long time will think, well, I've been doing this for donkey's years. Do I really need to sit in any sort of classroom and be taught about these things anymore? But I can tell you, having engaged with this and trying to produce it, it really makes you think and analyse every bit of what you do. And I think definitely is of value to all of us. So whether we're a long in the tooth surgeon like me or we're just out of our CCT, I think everybody benefits from doing this course. So if we have the next slide, please. So previously, there was a masterclass run as a sort of one-day course that you attended in person and went through these things. It's changed now. Obviously, all COVID pandemic and the way we've had to change our lives, things have tended to go online. And this is now online. And I think actually, COVID or not, this is a good way of doing it, because previously you attended for one day and that was your box ticked and done. Whereas now this is an ongoing process online where you can complete modules at your own speed, and you can interact throughout the process and get support throughout the process. So once you've registered for the certifications scheme, you can then apply you can do that over a period of time. It's not like you have to sit down one weekend and do it. It is an interactive process, and it's particularly designed that way to be helpful, so that you can go away and think about it and come back and discuss things with people. So we have the next slide, please. Could we? Yeah, great. Okay, so there's 4 learning modules that you have to complete. So in the first part of it, it's really all about standards. It's about that you have to know that you have to comply with in order to do your practice, that the things that govern how you do it, and in which we have no choice but to comply and do this well. So obviously things like the GMC, our medical regulator, we should all be aware of the standards they expect from us. But probably more of a minefield and a difficult area is things like GDPR, or the Competition and Mergers Authority, the Information Commission Officer. All of these are sort of regulatory bodies that we can fall foul of if we don't have the information at our fingertips and know what to do and how to do it. So the first part goes through that to explain what all these bodies do and how we have to interact with them, and what our responsibilities there are. It also covers things like insurance. Now, when I qualified as a doctor, it was very simple. You either went with the MD or the MPS, and you paid whatever they told you each year, and that was fine. But it's much more complicated now. There's many more people offering insurance, and they do vary enormously in cost, but also the value they bring to you as a surgeon. So again, the course intends to take you through the differences between the different providers, and hopefully give you some direction as to what might be best for you, so that you don't end up paying, for instance, more than you earn, which some of them do. So it's very, very helpful from that point of view. And then obviously in terms the 5 competencies and how you demonstrate discussion with colleagues, and just all the things that you need to do to maintain your skills. So you have them at the beginning, but you need to prove that you're maintaining them. So the next module then goes on to consider a patient. How does that patient get to you? What journey does the patient go on to find you? What influences them in getting to your doorstep? And how that matters really, because again, you know, in aesthetic surgery, it's not a question of being able to do a procedure, although being good at that is obviously critical, but it's a psychological issue surrounding your patient. So have they been coerced into coming to have their surgery, for instance? How do you recognise someone with dysmorphobia? How do you protect yourself and your patients from the psychological issues that might arise? So again, this is a little bit of instruction, but also a lot of reflection. You think about the patients you've had and how they've got to you and the outcomes that you've had, or have seen other people having to deal with. And hopefully that section is you know, a critical element in delivering a good practice. The third one is marketing. So again, marketing used to be very straightforward. You could, you know, stick your label up and get your patients in. But it is a minefield now of what you can and can't do, what you can and can't say in your advertising. And you do need to know these things, otherwise you can easily fall foul of them. Especially as things, so much is online now, and so many people will find you through social media. Social media isn't always saying the right things about you, so you have to have a way of getting your message out there so that people come to you for the right reasons, and when they have come to you, you deliver what you have said you will deliver. Then finally, we look at the consultation process. And again, this is so important in delivering a good treatment for your patient, because everything that you do in the theatre is nothing if you don't tell them before all the right information that they need to know. It is really critical, and again, it's something that not is only important for the patient being happy at the end of the day, but whether you can avoid litigation in this type of surgery. So you need to inform your patient well and kindly and in a professional way, so that you let them know the risks of what they're going through, but also let them know what a good outcome and how much what you can do for them will help them. Equally important in preparing them for that surgery is the post-operative care you give and how you look after them. It is surprisingly simple to do this really well, and it's basically by being caring and thoughtful and putting yourself in the patient's place. What would you want to know? What would you want someone you love to know if they were going through that process? How would you like them to be cared for afterwards? And you can avoid a huge amount of grief just by handling all of this well, especially if the operation doesn't go too well and there's a complication, or they complain, whether the complaint is justified or not. How you handle it will completely turn the situation around. So this part, the consultation process, is here to not just give information, but to let you discuss and think about things. You may have seen somebody going through, a colleague going through a litigation process, and it's extremely unpleasant. And hopefully, doing this course gives you the art to deal with it if you are unfortunate it happens to you, but more so to perhaps avoid getting into that situation at that point. So we hope that this course, which BARPS and BAPRAS have all worked very hard to produce, we hope it will be interesting and helpful and support you in your practice, and not just be a box that you need to tick. We'll be happy to take any questions about it shortly. Thank you very much. If I hand back to Pala now, I think.
So in summary, thank you very much for all the panelists who informed us as to how the very difficult process of engaging with all of the players in this certification scheme has come about with intercollegiate involvement. Now, I would like to inform all the applicants that they must register online to apply for certification through the World Wide Web certifycosmeticsurgery.org.uk. Eligible applicants must be on the GMC Specialist Register or registered with the Irish Medical Council. And I need to inform you that all the certified surgeons will appear on the register of the Certified Surgeons database. And attendance at the Professional Behaviors in Aesthetic Surgery course is a mandatory component of achieving certification. Now, with that, I would like to take questions which have come through to me. I'll just go back and I'll start with the first question. I think Vivian actually answered this, but just to clarify to the gentleman who sent this across, what is the total cost, please? Because online it appears to be slightly opaque. So can I request Vivian, please?
Yes. So the cost as currently stands for the new iteration of the course is a total of 1,150 for the full certification process, of which 450 is the actual masterclass itself. So it's £1,150, not £1,500, if that's clear. So there's two components to this. The masterclass has a price, and then it may be some time before you gather all the evidence ready to submit for your certificate. But when you do, there's a cost at that point, which is the registration process. So that's the total.
Thank you, Vivian. I hope that has been clear to the gentleman who posed the question. The next question is to Paul. What is your advice to a full-time NHS surgeon with a small but careful private practice, with a good safety and satisfaction record and review of results, but insufficient numbers to certify? So what is your advice, Paul?
So I think we would have a look at the numbers. I mean, we have looked at the numbers closely, and if you're not carrying out enough numbers to certify in the overall plastic surgery area, you may be having enough experience in one particular area. So there are lots of small areas that you can look at, or the whole cosmetic surgery area. As you've heard, we have lengthened the amount of retrospective time that you can count your numbers, and that's been lengthened because of COVID, but also this new reiteration. I think the numbers are in fact quite low now, and I don't want to go through the details here, but they are quite low. If you're not able to meet those numbers over the last 5, 6, 7 years, then you really will be doing very, very little cosmetic surgery indeed. And I think that you need to question whether it's the right thing for you to do or not. I think it will be a very, very small number of plastic surgeons, or even specialty trained surgeons who are working in the private sector. If they have any practice really with the retrospective amount of time that we're allowing, they should be able to collect enough numbers. If not, then they should question themselves whether they should be working in that area.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks very much. The next question is to Ruth. Does anyone have an example of an M&M where cosmetic surgery cases are discussed as part of an NHS M&M or a separate M&M hosted by a private hospital or chambers, etc.?
Okay, thank you for that question. And it's true, these things are difficult. So because obviously in our NHS practices, we're all wired into NDTs and do this on a regular basis. And I think it's definitely something that we need to address and forum. So it doesn't need to be a formal NDT. You can discuss things with colleagues. So anybody else working in the hospital that you work with, maybe people who you work with in your NHS practice who also do cosmetic surgery, you can informally sit down and discuss things. And actually, I think I would really encourage that way of working. One of the best ways of doing your private practice by far is to work with trusted colleagues. If you have a difficult case, discuss it with them, because they may have seen it before, done it before. Even ask them to do the procedure with you and get confidence in it yourself. So I think going forward, this will become a lot more common, and people will work more together like that, and it's definitely what we should do. So some things you can discuss in the NHS. You know, there's still a little bit of the aesthetic work done. So, for instance, in breast surgery, you know, as part of the breast reconstruction service for cancer patients, people will be using implants and meshes and using various flaps. So, you know, if you're going to do a breast augmentation, you've got a colleague who works in breast reconstruction and is putting in implants for symmetrization, that sort of thing. They will have a lot of experience and be able to give you advice, whether it's informally or through the MDT. So there are ways of doing that, but I would definitely encourage people to get together with colleagues that work in the same area, and geographically, and also in terms of super specialisation, and speak to them. If you've read a paper from someone who's done something really well, contact them, talk to them, have a conversation, and that will, it will give you a great deal more confidence, a great deal more knowledge than just trying to sit and sweat through it. And I actually think, that this process is designed to encourage that and enable that.
Thank you. Ruth, when you have these conversations with colleagues, do you think that you should record them and you should put them in your contemporaneous notes so that it will be available at a later date for anybody who wishes to look at your practice, especially appraisal and things like that, if this happens in the private sector?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. That is a big message for all of this as well. Don't just do it, but record that you've done it, reflect on what you've done. But it's such a powerful thing. Contemporaneous notes of what you've done, whether it's directly for the patient or a discussion with somebody else. I think, Paul, did you want to come in on that? Yeah.
I did. I just wanted to reinforce what you said, Ruth. I think it's an excellent thing to be moving into, and we've all been trying to encourage this. Just as a plug for BARPS, we have a resource. We launched BARPS Local, led by Drew Fleming, around 18 months ago. And we have a kind of resource pack which members can contact the Secretariat, and it will offer a structure for local M&M meetings in cosmetic surgery. And also it's a mechanism of feeding back and recording the meetings, looking at data, and also the associations or the college or the certification scheme feeding down to the members as well. So it can be used for not only individual patient discussions, but also for sort of the larger context of working in cosmetic surgery in the UK. And I can't reinforce enough what Ruth has said about working in groups with colleagues, perhaps not linked, financially or in marketing wise, but in terms of support for covering each other, for annual leave, for difficult cases. It's an essential part of practice moving forward, and I think we all need to look at the way we're working and trying to move in that direction. Finally, there's been some quite recent things going on. There's a very good WhatsApp group which is not run by any of the associations, but it's like an M&M meeting. Interesting cases with consent are put up and discussed, and the advice, the breadth and depth of advice that you get from your colleagues on this WhatsApp group is incredible. And so I think we do need to move into this area of new ways of working together.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that invaluable piece of advice. Srini, have you got anything to add on to this question, please?
Thank you. I think most has been said by Paul and Ruth anyway. The times of cosmetic surgery, most people started off possibly thinking that it is an individual, I'm doing it by myself, not sharing with anybody else. And you always looked at your colleague as a competitor. I think we need to move on to a different area where you need to look at a collaborator rather than a competitor. Because by discussing some cases with your colleagues, either in your own unit or your own area, own hospital, or even in a remote area by WhatsApp group, actually allows you to reflect and do better, both for yourself and for the patient. And there's enough work out there. It is not that we have to fight over each other for the work. It is how good we do the work, how safe we deliver the work is what's the key thing. And the whole ethos of what all the associations are moving towards, providing mentorship, providing guidance and governance and MDT discussion, is to be collaborative, not being competitive.
Thank you. Just to extend that question, there's somebody who has sent a question in, especially for Paul. Has BAPS changed their regulation about admitting non-plastic surgeons, breast and ENT, to the association? I think BAPS has to recognize that aesthetic surgery is open to other specialties. Paul.
Well, this is an interesting area for debate and discussion. BARPS has been historically for plastic surgeons, and we changed, I think, when Adam Searle was president around 12, 13 years ago. We opened that out and we had a new interspecialty section of membership, and we've embraced many different specialties into our association over the years. There's been lots of debate and it continues on, and the numbers are limited. And so, we are trying to be collaborative. We're trying to open things out, and we invite new. In fact, this year we've had a new ENT surgeon become a member. So although the numbers are small, we are continuing to open up BARPS for non-plastic surgeons. And I just wanted to sort of say about this. The position that I've taken this evening really is because of the membership of BARPS plastic surgeons, the way that they have communicated with me with respect to the certification course. But of course, the certification course, the benefits of the course and are there for all surgeons, for all trained surgeons. And I'm not trying to undermine the non-plastic surgeons in my approach. I'm just trying to make it more appealing for everybody. And I think the benefits the changes that have come about will benefit everybody in all specialties. And we want to be as collaborative and as open as possible moving forward. And particularly as we evolve in this area of cosmetic surgery, everyone's becoming much more specialized now. I mean, most of us are specializing in a particular area. I don't do rhinoplasty anymore. I don't do ears or things like that. So I think we're all moving into specialist areas, but there is an umbrella of cosmetic surgery governance and professional behavior that is at play here, and I think is really, really important.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. I have a comment from my good friend Nigel Mercer, who states that the only way to differentiate between trained and untrained surgeons is the certification scheme. So he's flying the flag for us. There is existing law that states a surgeon must be on the specialist register of the GMC to perform cosmetic surgery, but it has never been used in the 20 years since the law was passed. So thanks, Nigel, for your comment. The next question is to Vivian. For newly CCT'd and Article 14 CSER consultants on the specialist register, will credit be made for procedures partially performed or assisted in as part of training or fellowship? Otherwise, are you expected to wait until you obtain numbers for these procedures as a consultant before being able to apply? This could take years depending upon numbers required. Vivian, thank you.
I think that's going to be helpful to answer that. So in terms of the actual number of operations you do, you get 1 point if you perform the procedure. You get also credit for assisting with the procedure. That's half a point, and I think I'm right in saying it's a quarter of a point for an observed procedure where you're not scrubbed up. So even by visiting and seeing the different way that people do things, you can still be demonstrating your commitment. We're also in discussion at the moment about whether doing cadaveric masterclass work would attract some points, and I think we'll probably go down that line in a careful but qualified way also. So there's going to be a number of ways that you can approach that. So you get the credits for what you've done through your registrar training, but we're not expecting people to get their CCT on a Monday and get this credential on a Tuesday. It's really not going to work like that. So we're really asking people to evidence their learning through demonstrating their proficiency, their behaviours and their experience. So the certificate, for me, it feels a little bit like the American boards. So that's an experiential thing where you demonstrate cases, you think about them, and it's moving up a level, no doubt. And I think that's a really positive thing for us to be aiming at. So I hope that answers that question.
Thank you. Thank you. The next one is for Srinivas. How will the certificate be used for those of us doing cosmetic surgery within the NHS, such as rhinoplasty and pinaplasty, particularly larger numbers under NHS than privately?
It probably, as Vivian just was alluding to, it is an area where you continue to show your commitment for developing and maintaining a higher standard, be it you do it in the aesthetic sector or private sector, the NHS sector. Because such cases, as we all know, when a good outcome comes from any of these procedures, it makes two people very happy, the patient and the surgeon who performed it. But we all as surgeons know, all it takes is one bad result. Surgeon may feel it's a good result, patient may perceive otherwise. Particularly in the rhinoplasty sector, you would probably be aware that minor discrepancies that you as a professional think is very small can be a major impact on the patient for a lifetime. Therefore, whether you are doing it in the NHS or on the private sector, the ability to understand the impact of what you're doing and how you can deliver a safe and higher standard of care to the patient, equally be safe for yourself as a professional, is very important. So this is not just having a kind of certificate in the hand to go and do work in the private sector. It will be like what Vivian was alluding to, more as a reflective practice to make yourself a better informed, thoughtful professional in the way you deliver, as well as providing a higher standard. So I think there is still some value in doing it.
Thank you very much. Just to extend that, the question here is, how will hang on a minute. Can you please give an idea of number of cases required in this forum? Do reconstructions post breast cancer count? One for Ruth.
Yes, so there are sort of crossovers, if you like. So you can submit from, say, your reconstruction, or if you do DX for breast reconstruction, then what you're doing on the abdomen is contributing to your experience to that side of things. So it's all set out so that these things can contribute in a certain way. Obviously, the intention is slightly different with a reconstructive procedure, but in terms of demonstrating your skills in those areas and your knowledge of how to do things, these will all contribute to your building up your point for your submission. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, there's another question here. How will this certification scheme fit for those whose practice is largely non-surgical, specifically like most of us who provide dermal fillers and toxin treatment? I think I'll ask Vivian this question.
Okay, so we're currently working on a further option for a certificate in non-surgical treatments. So at the moment, we've got modules for facial work, for eyes, for body contouring, for breast. So we can also see ourselves in the future having one for non-surgical. So people who are doing different things could all apply for that. And we had thought about possibly making it an element of individual certificates, but we've decided in the end it's going to work better if we make a separate one, but it's not available yet. It will be there, it will be there. And remember, you don't have to have a certificate in all of the areas, it can just be one. And on the GMC credential, eventually it'll be either the ones that you've done that are your postnomial, or it'll be the all areas certificate that members of the plastic surgeons will choose to do. but you can build them up over time, and you won't keep being charged if you do one and then a couple of years later you pick up another one as your practice gradually develops and you get more cases of a certain type.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that answers the person's question. The next one is, as a plastic surgery trainee, a couple of years away from CCT, when do you think is the best time to start the application process? Now or when I actually achieve CCT? Srini.
Okay, that's a good question. And having been involved in the regional aesthetic training days with BOPS for some time now, this topic comes up in any trainee meeting that we attend to. Interestingly, I must admit, more than 50% of the trainees that we talked about these things were very engaged in participating in the certification scheme. They found it's a good value. Coming to a question, if you are collecting enough credits based on your NHS training work that you're doing already, I've been asking all my trainees to consciously collect and keep it aside, apart from the ISCP book, to keep a separate portfolio of the credits anyway. So you will know whether you have enough credits to apply for the certification scheme by the time you come to the CCT. My suggestion will be that the professional behaviors course, you can apply possibly 6 months before your CCT or at the time of your CCT, and then wait and see when you want to apply for the certification scheme itself, when you got enough numbers, or if you say, when I started doing your private practice at the moment, then you feel equipped to do that, that may be the right time. But it's a continuous process. I would say if you're 2 years away from your CCT, start preparing for it even now. Collect the credits even now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is an open question, but I think I'll direct it to Paul. Does the panel think that the certificate will open the doors for surgeons, medical practitioners who have very little experience in aesthetic surgery to successfully certify? Would that not make the certificate of less value in terms of protecting patients?
I think it's a very good question. Thank you. Actually, of course, the idea is the opposite. The idea is that the certificate differentiates between well-trained professional surgeons acting in this area, as opposed to the less well-trained or untrained practitioners. And so the whole idea is, and I think that perhaps one of the problems we had was that we felt that by taking part in this, we would make it easy for other people. It would be a shortcut for others to get through. This is not a shortcut at all. You need some basic requirements, which are things like CCT, which are experience in specific areas, and numbers to get through this. So it's not difficult for a trained surgeon to achieve certification, but it will be very, very difficult for an untrained surgeon to meet the requirements.
Thank you. The next question, wow, we have plenty of questions. This is fascinating as far as I'm concerned. As we all know, for most cosmetic surgeons, the non-surgical range of treatments are increasing, so much so as to overtake cosmetic surgical procedure with regard to numbers. Is it anticipated that the GMC will move to regulate this area, which is very worryingly unregulated at present? I think, Vivian, you answered that partially. Can I come back to you again to help this person?
Yes, I think it's a very insightful question. So 80% of the cosmetic market is non-surgical and growing. So we definitely do see a place for further regulation in that. It's not specifically the remit that Sir Bruce Keogh gave us in 2013, but there is another stream of work from the Department of Health that has produced a group that you can sign up to. I'm sorry, I'm just forgetting exactly the name of it. FCCP, I think that is. You have to pay every year for that. Thank you, Paul. which is about £400 a year to belong to that. Now, I'm very much hoping that with the non-surgical certificate that we will produce, that you're not going to have to pay that £400 because you will have effectively done it and acquired it through this platform. But we will be working with this group, we will be collaborating with them. So that's where we have it. So it's not that people who perhaps give Botox at the hairdressers are going to be able to apply for our version of that certificate, because they're not. They don't have a CCT, so they don't have the entry card to get into that. So that's how we see that developing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next question is, if it becomes an indemnity requirement to have this certification, how will a newly qualified surgeon be able to gain enough numbers, even counting during training, as most are observed or assisted? Are we leaving them out in the cold to be uncertified surgeons initially? Srini.
Well, I think it's a question we need to discuss with indemnifiers. It's a difficult question. I don't think we are there yet. I don't think indemnity organizations are going to be such a gatekeepers, not at the moment. However, if it comes to that position, Bobs and Barbara's offered mentorship for people who are starting off in their aesthetic practices. So these people can then say that I have a named mentor who is going to be with me in the beginning of my career time, and therefore there is a help available for me to discuss, and those things will validate their engagement in the process of being a thoughtful professional. That should suffice for indemnity organizations to go through. I don't think indemnity organizations will make it so rigid for them to lose membership. They want membership anyway, but all they want is a safe member. And if we can provide it by being a certification scheme and having a mentorship program provided by both the associations, that will support them very well, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. We are very close to 7:30, but I think I would like to pose the next question to Paul. Would the National Aesthetic Fellowship count towards the certification process? If I did the fellowship, does that give me the required experience and knowledge?
One would hope so. It depends upon the individual fellowships, of course, and the numbers still need to be met. But as I said in one of my earlier answers, the numbers are not exceptionally high. And I think that going through a fellowship would be a vital part of training. And I think most of us feel that a post-CCT or indeed pre-CCT fellowship in aesthetic surgery is now becoming a really vital part of our training before we move into practice. And it will, of course, be a way of gaining the numbers, and hopefully enough numbers. Now, I think, as all participants have mentioned, there'll need to be a period of independent working, either in terms of mentorship or in the first few years of practice, that puts clear water between CCT and the certification process. So this is an extra level, and there will need to be, which we haven't established yet. We are talking about it in detail. We will need to set out what those additional steps will involve and how long it can take. But certainly the fellowship will be an essential step on the ladder, and it will help with numbers. In itself, it will not be an entry criteria, but it will give you the numbers, that's for sure, and the experience.
Thank you very much, Paul. I think the last question before we close this session, the UK already has many regulations and controls over this surgery. Do we need another one? Provocative question. Ruth?
Yeah, so it's a great question, isn't it? We feel like everyone's got a big stick with which to beat us. I think, you know, the difference here is, yes, it is something that the government has asked us to do because, you know, the public concern that there are people out there who don't do this well. And I think that's really why we've worked so hard to create something that isn't just another burden on us, but is actually something really helpful and supportive, and that we all work with together, so that we can stand proud and knowledgeable and confident in what we do. And you know, I do think we are now producing that product that shouldn't be looked upon as something just, you know, another box that you've got to tick and it's a burden and awful. You know, a great deal of what is after the certification is something that all of you out there will have at your fingertips already, because it's things like appraisal and revalidation, and good training, supportive colleagues. You know, you do really have these things when you think about it. And this is just to put it all together. And then, you know, with the course that we offer, it gives an enormous amount of support. And, you know, at the end of the day, it puts you in a position where your indemnifier will give you a good price because of it. It will mean that you can pitch up at any private provider in the country and be welcomed through the doors. You know, you should see it as something, you know, as being part of a club which supports you and helps you, and isn't that all, you know, just another awful thing that the government's imposed. I really hope that that's the way people will see this.
Thank you very much, Ruth. And on that note, I would like to thank all the attendees. We've had close to 100 attendees this evening. Thank you very much for your participation and for providing us with a lot of questions, which added to the discussion this evening. I would like to personally thank Vivian, Ruth, Paul, and Srinivas for a fascinating evening today. Thank you very much and stay safe.
Thank you.